السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونتوب إليه، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله، أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. عباد الله، أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله. أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله. أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله. واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا، وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها. من يهدي الله فهو المهتد، ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. الحمد لله على نعمة الإسلام، الحمد لله على نعمة الإيمان، الحمد لله على نعمة الإحسان. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an, in chapter 55, chapter of Ar-Rahman, Allah begins the chapter by saying Ar-Rahman, by declaring the Merciful One. And Ar-Rahman is one of the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Ar-Rahman is one of the 90 names of Allah. And the verses were revealed in Mecca. And when the chapter was revealed, and the Qur'an declares Ar-Rahman, Quraysh said, what is Ar-Rahman? Right? So the Arabs knew Allah. They knew a variety of terms for the idols that they were describing, because they had a belief or an understanding of the existence of Allah, but what they had is association with Allah. And they said that these idols, these inanimate objects on earth, draw us near to Allah, meaning that they were an object to get Qur'an, to get a closeness to Allah by means. So in essence, a mechanism or a way to relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not part of our belief, but that's what the Quraysh, the Arabs, have. And that's around similar to today. Each city has its own sport idol, but that's a different issue. So you could see trans-historical nature of objectification of a particular notion of the human being. So the Quran continues by trying to give us an understanding of Ar-Rahman. Right? And the first explanation or expansion of who is Ar-Rahman, saying Ar-Rahman 'allama al-Qur'an. That the Rahman, the Merciful One, is the one that taught the Qur'an. And that's why, from our perspective, Allah's revelation of the Qur'an to us and teaching us the Qur'an is a bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we express gratitude for Allah giving us the Qur'an and teaching the Qur'an to us. And how He taught it to us is by sending us an example, which is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Aisha radiallahu anha, when they asked her about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said that kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an, that his character was the Qur'an. In another reference, it said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the walking Qur'an. Was the walking Qur'an, meaning that in his character, in his form, he manifested the totality of the understanding of the Qur'an. And in another description, the Prophet ﷺ says, I was given the Qur'an and like it with it. And that's the understanding of the Sunnah, the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ is part and parcel of revelation, because the Prophet's Sunnah expanded that which was general in the Qur'an and gave it specificity. It also showed us how to implement the various verses. It showed us how to pray, because the Qur'an says prayer is obligatory, but it's only we go to the Sunnah to understand how we actually undertake our obligation. Similarly in Hajj, the Prophet ﷺ said, خُذُوا مَنَاسِكَكُمْ عَنِّي. Take your patterns of Hajj from me. Now Allah is saying here, عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ, that the character of Allah Ar-Rahman is a mu'allim. Allah is a mu'allim. And we did this also characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the creation of Adam. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, that Allah taught Adam the names of all things. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in an authenticated hadith said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ مُعَلِّمًا. Verily I was sent but a teacher. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a mu'allim, and also the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is a teacher. Meaning our tradition is rooted in ilm, in knowledge, in teaching. And it's no surprise that the first word of revelation is Iqra, read. Read. And read it only 3 times in the Qur'an, a sign of its magnitude. In the Qur'an there is one way to express something that is to be very important is you mention it a lot. Another way is that fewest mentioning is also a sign of importance. That I'm telling you this, so pay attention, because I'm not going to repeat it to you except in 1 or 2 times. So Allah's, in here, Ar-Rahman, the Merciful One, is defined by 'Allama al-Qur'an, that He is the one that taught the Qur'an. Now some who have what you call the rule one says, well, how did God teaches the Qur'an? He did not come down. So that's those who want to objectify God, because they see Him once again in an objectification. So they think that when talking to Muslims, they say, oh, you guys believe in this God that you can't see that's teaching you the Qur'an. Alright, so they begin to express these rudimentary ways to tell you that you are irrational. Even though that any notion of only using scientific facts has many irrationality, because I'd rather believe in the oneness of God who created than actually say that we all came from cosmic soup. And we'll say cosmic soup that doesn't possibly have any salt or spice in it. Right? So this notion is saying that you are irrational because you believe in a God that taught the Qur'an. But immediately actually Allah answers Ar-Rahman by saying خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ also. So it's describing that Allah is the Khaliq, Mu'allim and Khaliq. Ar-Rahman, Allama Qur'an. As if immediately thinking of our questions today, of saying that it is your Lord, Ar-Rahman, who actually created the human being. Because if there is a definition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that you are Khaliq. خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ. And we differentiate between making something versus creation. Creating is bringing something out of nothing. Bringing into existence that which did not exist. And that's why the challenge in the Qur'an still stands there today. If all the creation gathered to create the wing of a fly, that's the challenge in the Qur'an. If all of creation gathered to create a wing of a fly, they will not be able to do it. A wing of a fly, not a human being, it's a wing of a fly. Actually, Allah actually gives another challenge even bigger. In conceptualization, it says that if they are able to return something that the fly have took away from them, if they just are able to take that which the fly took away from them, then they can actually have a challenge to Allah. And Allah says that that which is thought is beyond their capacity. And now we know in terms of chemistry that as soon as the fly takes something, it can completely change its chemical compound. So if the fly takes away from you something, it's all beyond the capacity to transform it back to its original state. So Allah in the Quran makes that challenge. So because right now we worship scientific discovery, and important that it is, Muslims have their share in scientific discovery, but there is a separation between science on the one hand and believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we never had this what we call discrepancy between rationality and belief. Reason and belief. Muslims did not have a problem with it because they understood the boundaries of belief and understood the boundaries of rationality, reason, and science. It is only modernity that is unable to make that differentiation and know where the divine parameters are and belief parameters and the parameters of science and, broadly speaking, the exploration of knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman, is describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being a mu'allim, by being a teacher. So anyone that says Islam is anti-knowledge does not even understand it from their tool, right? And they need to look at the mirror that actually can give them a different perspective of where they are. So Allah is mu'allim, Allah is khaliq, and then it speaks about a human being. علمه البيان. خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. Now bayan is a term that has many possibilities in terms of, it could be means eloquence, it could be also taught him rationality, taught him reason, taught him logic, how to construct a logical argument. All are possible within the term al-bayan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught the human being al-bayan. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that verily from taught him from eloquence or rationality or exposition that verily from bayan is a magic. Not in a magic in the sense of what we think about or content about that. A person can be so eloquent that they actually can take people's minds and essentially give them to see reality in a different way. See is a misuse of that. Anyone who looks at advertisements, at arguments, at speeches, politicians and otherwise, knows that they make three basic appeals. This has been the case from Socrates all the way up to our present. The emotional appeal, the logical appeal, and also what you call status or the person's credibility appeal. And I want to spend a few times to show that we need to actually understand that not every bayan is actually leading toward justice, because our tradition is to use bayan to that which is just. To that which is just. Because علمهم البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in the verses, is giving us immediately from our bayan to give us reflection about the heavens and earth, about the trees and the environment, but immediately says that He is the one that built up and raised the heavens and put the scales of justice. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ. Meaning, if we make a link of our eloquence, of our rationale, of our reason, of our argument, it is to argue and make sure that we do our bayan for justice. Now, bayan is all being used to fool people and to take from their wealth, take from their human values, to actually make them act almost animal-like. That's why the Qur'an Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described those who turn away from Allah, hum kal-an'am. Hum kal-an'am. They're like the beasts or the animals. But Allah actually does say, they are actually worse than. Meaning, an animal is being an animal. So it's actually an insult when you say to somebody, oh, you donkey. It's an insult to the donkey, because the donkey just being a donkey. It's an insult when you call somebody by a particular name of an animal. It's an insult to the animal, because the animal did not do anything. And actually they have the right to come in judgment. They say, why did you call me to compare me to this person who has disobeyed Allah? So if you think of all the tyrants, and often we use these terms, so-and-so is like a donkey. I feel bad for the donkey, because he has not done anything to deserve to be compared to someone that disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the donkey has the right to come and say, what did I do? I carried your luggage, I took you back and forth, you used me to turn the soil, and I sometimes sit in the back of your house and wake you up in the morning for Fajr when you stay asleep. And you compare me to so-and-so who is disobedient to Allah, who have caused mischief. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually does this. Says, nay, they're actually worse than that, because the animal is actually all the time in a state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So thinking of how bayan is being used, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who taught us this mode of expression. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us able to make these arguments. And the Prophet ﷺ said that, let not one of you come into my gathering, in terms of a court gathering, and be more eloquent in their speech, in making their claim. Because I might rule in your favor based on your eloquence, and I'm giving you something that actually is of hellfire. And we know the importance of argumentation in court these days. We know the importance. That's why a very expensive lawyer is able to make 90 today and day tonight in the court. And all of a sudden, the one who committed a crime is not actually found guilty based on the eloquence of the lawyer. That's just a fact. So our eloquence, our understanding, our bayan is to be used for justice. Just think a minute about all this notion of advertisement. So all of a sudden, this is one commercial after the other, after the other. The whole structure of the argument for the car, or the drink, or the clothes, is to appeal to an emotional aspect of you and make that car fulfill a particular need that you have. And all of a sudden, you think that if I'm sitting in this car, I'm going to be such and such. They made that into the appeal. I was coming on board and they have this advertisement from JFK University. Right? They're basically saying, come on into your wasir, into your destiny. So now the advertisement is appealing to you to try to get you to go to JFK, which is a for-profit university. They don't tell you that you go in and they're going to hold you up with $70,000 or $80,000 debt. So your wasir is basically to be indebted from birth to death. But the commercial looks so good, it appeals and you begin to think, oh, my job, I have such a bad job right now. I am doing this and this. And then appealing to your self-insecurity and a sense of wanting more. And therefore they make that appeal to you by means of this imagery, by means of this advertisement. And what they're appealing basically, they know that you have some money in your pocket, but they want you to come and be transformed into a number. And the number becomes that we need to recruit X number of students in order for us to have a growth rate in our education, right, industry, because it's transformed into an industry. So we need to be 3%, 4%, 5%, otherwise our investors in country A or country B, because it's all becoming commercialized. So even education itself has been commodified by means of this use of bayan in order for us to actually increase the level of misery of people. So education has been transformed into a commodity, subjugated to the same forces in our own society, and it's no longer for how to improve society. That's not what the Muslims are about. That's not what our tradition. Ilm is actually to try to draw you near to the divine. Ilm is to differentiate between that which is just and that which is unjust. And actually we understand that there are some ilm that is harmful to human beings. The Prophet ﷺ used to do a dua to actually seek protection from Allah from ilmun la yanfa. I seek protection from Allah from a knowledge that is not useful. And we have made knowledge that is not useful into an industry. Because the only principle we operate, can you generate 3% return? We don't ask how much return is with Allah. You're getting the 3%, 4%, 5%, 10%, but what is your account with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And therefore our tradition is a tradition to look with divine eyes onto the world. That we're not divine, but actually to look at the world with the divine knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conveys. And that is the response. That is the scale we measure things. Not that we have more or less, because كل من عليها فان. Everything in this creation is unto annihilation. And the only thing that remains is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your measurement of bayan, of eloquence, understanding of rationality, is actually to understand what is it that you need to convey, and to always rationalize the hereafter versus this world. Because this is alam al-bala, and it's a fool that thinks using bayan for this world is a fool. Because you are actually building for somebody else. And how often that we use all of our bayan to gather wealth that somebody else is going to inherit. And when they inherit, they say, MashaAllah, he just uses bayan to get us this. You make all the wrong deeds, the person gets all the good deeds. Then after, because they might use your wealth to donate to do all kinds of good work on behalf of those wealth that you collect. So bayan for us is to be on behalf of justice and to understand that ilm from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for you to be an agent of justice and agent of good in this world, and not to use your eloquence, rationality, reason to benefit, or not to benefit, but to draw the wealth of people and to make them more miserable. And that is the condition that we find ourselves these days. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونتوب إليه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. Once again, just to sum up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be just human beings. The message of Islam is knowledge to lead humanity and to be part of the humanity based on the scales of justice. And the scales of justice is not about just us. It's not about making profits for us. It's not only securing us. It's actually to fulfill the role of being a vicegerent in this world, which is to establish scales of justice, whether people are Muslim or not. That's not your business. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the final, He determines who is guided and who is not. Even the Prophet in the Quran, Allah says, لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing unto you of this affair. It's only in the hands of Allah. And that's why when Ibn Maktoum came as a blind man, seeking the guidance of the Prophet was busy trying to do da'wah for what he thought would be something of importance. And that's what he said, عَبَسَ وَتَوَلَّى أَنْ جَاءَهُ الْأَعْمَى. So the affairs of guidance is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What your responsibility is to establish the scales of justice. That's your responsibility, to be a just human being and to fulfill the requirement, not only for you but everyone. So we're not allowed to treat others because they're not Muslim unjustly. We're not allowed to say they're well just for that. We have to establish to be consistent. And even people who actually wrong us, right? And the Qur'an says, وَلَا يَجْرُمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا اعْدِلُوا وَأَقْرَبُوا لِلتَّقْوَى. The transgressions of people that have wronged you to deviate from the scales of justice. Be just, that is closer to piety and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the message of the Qur'an, the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us is to use the Qur'an, the knowledge, whatever was revealed to us to establish the scales of justice, and also mercy, because the first word of the verses was Ar-Rahman, the Merciful one. So that's really the foundation of our tradition, and we need to uphold it and continue to live by it, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا بالخير شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي بالخير ولا يقضى عليك وإنه لا يذل من واليت تبارك ربنا وتعالى. ربنا ردنا إلى الإسلام ردا جميلا. ربنا ردنا إلى الإسلام ردا جميلا. ربنا ردنا إلى الإسلام ردا جميلا. اللهم أصلح ذات بيننا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أصلح ذات بيننا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أصلح ذات بيننا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم من أراد المسلمين والمسلمات خيرا فأيده بنصر من عندك ومن أراد الإسلام والمسلمين شرا فخذه أخذ عزيز مقتدر يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحم المسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحم المسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحم المسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات يا رب العالمين. اللهم خفف على إخواننا المسلمين في كل مكان. اللهم خفف عنهم. اللهم خفف عنهم. اللهم خفف عنهم. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
حقا لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا واعتدلوا وأثابنا